Stretching out here. We're going to get the clock going in a second. 5 bets in 5 minutes. It's a race. It's not a marathon. It's a sprint. We're going to give you 5 bets. We'll start the clock. I know you see the video thinking, wait a second, it's a little bit longer, isn't it, than 5 minutes? Yes, I have some other things I need to tell you about. And as always, we wet your beak just a little bit, right? So we'll see BetMGM right over there, and I'll tell you about what's going on. But in the background, there's our first play. So bear with me for a second, right? Because I'm at least giving you the first play ahead of time, even though we'll go through it for sure. We want you to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the fastest growing sports betting community here on YouTube. That is fact. We have certification to prove that, authenticity to prove that. And that's all because of you out there. So thank you. If you're new, if you just stumbled on this, please join us. And if you're a veteran, a savvy, salty veteran of the Odd Shopper channel, the free Odd Shopper channel, and then the Odd Shopper site, we appreciate you. Thank you for spreading the word, because that has also been a huge help here. All right, BetMGM, $10, win $200. It's all about on Saturday, Moneyline college football. So I'll tell you about that and also about the premium insider access. But let's not waste any more time here, because I know you're salivating. I know you're ready. I know you want to go here. So what we're going to do is start the clock now. 5 bets in 5 minutes. All right, first bet under 20.5 team total for Jacksonville. All right, the reason they scored 21 points just one time last year at home. So Trevor Lawrence, like him, love Doug P. It wasn't great last week, though, and I don't think they correct all of those mistakes overnight. It's not going to happen right away against a pretty good defense in the Colts. Look, Jacksonville, 3-14 against the spread since 2019 in straight up home losses. They're not covering when they lose at home. This will be an outright win, which I don't think is going to happen, or a bad loss, unfortunately. Indy's defense needs to outplay Matt Ryan. We know that as well. So, yes, first play, because I don't see how Trevor Lawrence overnight is going to correct those mistakes and fix problems that were last year. All right, so that's the first play under 20.5 team total for Jacksonville. Next play, all right, Steelers, and we're right there. Look at that. Forget that spread. There's no value at 2.5. We'll just take them straight up, all right? We'll take them to win outright. Belichick 2-6 against the spread as a road favorite over the last 2 years, and that was with a healthy quarterback and a competent offensive coordinator. I'm not sure he's got either heading into this weekend on the road. He's a road favorite. Come on. Tomlin's 9-2-4 against the spread as a home dog since 2014. Not all of those games, mind you, at home as a home dog have been with Ben Roethlisberger. Mac Jones, only in his career, only averaging 20.5 points per game on the road. And again, that's healthy. And again, that's with an offensive coordinator that we believe to be competent, right? So, yeah, we're taking the Steelers to beat the Patriots all day on the money line, plus 115 at home. Next game, all right, let's keep it moving here. Right above, Giants laying the 2 or the 130 on the money line. No problem here to win and cover this spread. And I'm going to give you the laundry list. Brian Daboll, Shea Tierney, Bobby Johnson, all from Buffalo, all in New York, all beat Baker Mayfield 31-14 last year. Mike Kafka beat him a couple of years back in Kansas City. Jerome Henderson, Thomas McGaughey, all on the team that beat Mayfield last year. This Giants team that beat them last year 25-3. Don Martindale, new defensive coordinator, comes from Baltimore, right? Beat up on Mayfield in Cleveland in division. The Giants defensive line coach, Andre Patterson, comes from Minnesota. He beat Mayfield last year and Matt Rule in each of the last 2 years. All of these guys, all of these coaches have beaten Matt Rule. So, yes, without hesitation, without a doubt, it's going to be the same scenario here to win and to cover. We move on to our next play. And here, it's not just Denver winning this game. It's not just Denver bouncing back and responding to all of the shit and all the crap that they've heard this week. We'll push it to minus 10.5 at even money. All right, that's our fourth play. There's not really much to say except they fucked up. And Nathaniel Hackett has heard you fucked up all week. You messed up. You are the reason why this team, your new team, lost a football game. A winnable football game, mind you. So, yeah, I'm looking at that thinking this is an opportunity here to take a great bounce back. Russell Wilson beat Houston, torched Houston last year, and that was going up against arguably, right, a better defense than they have this year. So Wilson is out for justice, out for blood, out for vengeance. Nathaniel Hackett's just not out to screw it up. And he was on the Green Bay staff in 2020, so he torched Houston back then. No problem there. Speaking of Green Bay, and we wind down with this Packers and Bears game, all right? And we're just going to go under 41.5. Green Bay is healthy. I don't think it truly matters so much, but Green Bay is healthy right now. They're getting some guys back, some key guys that were not playing last week in that loss in Minnesota. That's going to add to the pounding here. You want to lay 10, go ahead, go nuts. I just think that Chicago, and we can look again deep as you want, Chicago, the offensive line issues, the issues with Justin Fields, the accuracy issues, the receiver issues, just the offensively challenged Chicago Bears going up against a Packers defense that wants to set the record straight and absolutely has the talent now to squeeze and suffocate Fields. Might be a good day to take Fields over on the rushing props, but in this case, we just want to keep it simple here and make sure that you understand that even with a healthy Packers team, you're getting a 38-0. You're getting a 35-3 game, and that's your 5-5. See? It's that simple. All right? Now, let's run this back for you here, just in case you missed that, because we run through this sucker as fast as humanly possible, right? Under 20.5 team total for the Jags. Steelers money line, plus 115. Giants laying 2, win and cover. Broncos, not only to win, not only to cover, but to cover that alt minus 10.5 line.
There are a lot of long last names this week, like more so than usual. Yeah, maybe just do the last names. If you only want to do one money line, just do the favorites odds instead of the underdogs. What is happening, everybody? It's time for another Stokastic MMA Live Before Lock show. Jason on the road because the Buccaneers are on the road. So instead, I'm going to be here breaking down the fights with Pete the Heat. I'm pretty excited about it. I love whenever I get extra work added to my schedule, and it's the MMA show. I know a lot of times people will be like, oh, I have extra work to do. Not me. I always ask. If I see Jason's going to be away, I message Chris. I say, Chris, put me on the MMA show so I can hang out with Pete. And that's what we're going to be doing today. Guys, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're sponsored by PrizePicks today. Pete, what's going on? How are you feeling about this slate?
What is going on? Early fight time. You already know I love that. So I'm able to actually watch some fights. It's always a little tilting when I cannot see the main event or the main card in general. So I can kick back, watch some fights, make some money with you guys, and just enjoy the day. So yeah, I'm excited. You know, decent card top to bottom. I like some of the fights, as you mentioned. I think for the amount of fights, there's plenty of interesting bouts, tons of volatile matchups, kind of approaching this slate, embracing the variance. I really feel like it's going to be a wild one as far as the optimal lineup is considered.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of fights. You and I were talking beforehand. There's a ton of fights that are expected to finish inside the distance. Like we've got a bunch of fights. It's like minus 200, minus 250 to finish inside the distance. So there's going to be some early finishes. There's going to be some big scores. And let's start by talking about the main event where we've got Song Yadong taking on Corey Sandhagen. And to be honest, in the past, I've never been massively high on Yadong, just relative to other people's expectations of him, because I think he's a really good young fighter. I don't think he's quite on the Sandhagen level, though. Like, I'm a big mark for Corey Sandhagen, and I think he could be a champion at some point. I thought he won the fight against TJ Dillashaw, and his career might be in a way different spot had the judges given him the nod in that fight. So I'm favoring him pretty significantly in this fight over Yadong. I think it's primarily going to be a fight that takes place at distance, and we do have a much longer fighter in Sandhagen and more output on his side. In the past, when we've seen Sandhagen struggle, it's often been against fighters that can mix in the wrestling. I don't know we're going to see Yadong do that in this matchup. But first, which side of the fight are you favoring, and how high of a priority is the main event for DFS?
Yeah, so I really like the fight. I think it's a massive step up in competition, to be honest, for Song Yadong. Obviously picking up an extremely notable win over Marlon Moraes. But, to a point, Marlon Moraes was washed a little bit. And no disrespect to Marlon Moraes, but, the book was out on how to beat him, really. Like, whether you overwhelm him or you take him into deep water and get rid of him because of his suspect cardio. But the chin was gone, and Song Yadong can crack really, really hard. So I think that offensively, Song Yadong has the potential to beat Corey Sandhagen. It's just the volume and the variety coming from Corey Sandhagen back towards Song Yadong, I think is going to be a little bit tricky. So, obviously the resume, the strength of schedule for Corey Sandhagen speaks for itself. And on paper, it looks like he should handle Song Yadong no problem at all in this matchup. And I am favoring Corey. I really like his versatility. And I actually think a sneaky path to victory for him too is, putting a stamp on some rounds, solidifying rounds by landing some takedowns. And, I think Song Yadong should try to do that, but I don't think that he's the superior grappler here. So I actually think, seeing Corey Sandhagen out volume Petr Yan 169 to 149 significant strikes, landing a takedown, it's just like a sneaky stamp on a round. And I think Sandhagen's going to pull it off here. For DraftKings, you got 5 rounds to work with. Whether it goes the distance or it's a later finish, I'm expecting Sandhagen to do just fine at that price point in 9,200. So, I like Sandhagen a lot, to be honest. And, some weeks where I'm always saying prioritize main event and co-main event underdogs, there are so many fights on this slate. Like, you don't have to reach towards Song Yadong at 7,000 if you do not like him. But inside the UFC, he is 8-1-1 overall. So, on any given night, man, we're talking about some of the best fighters in the world, and, you can have an off night and get outperformed. But I don't know about you. I really like Corey Sandhagen.
Yeah, I like Sandhagen. From a DFS standpoint, I'm not all that much different than the field. I am a little bit underweight because we haven't projected for right around 50% ownership. And there's just a lot of high-priced fighters that I'm trying to get to. But I'm not playing very much of Song Yadong on the other side for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not picking him to win the fight, which how much exposure do I really want to get to somebody who I don't think has a lot of win equity? But also, he's so popular right now. We haven't projected for 35% ownership. And I think there are a lot of underdogs that have a lot of upside, that have a lot of win equity. So, like, for instance, we've got Cameron Van Camp, who's projected for just a small portion of the ownership that Yadong is getting. But he's plus 135 odds to win, as opposed to Yadong being a longer underdog. So in terms of the way I'm looking at this fight, I'm around even the field on Corey Sandhagen. Yadong, though, I'm not really getting very much of. I have only about a third of what the field has right now in terms of exposure to him, because there are so many underdogs I like getting to. I don't think this is one of these slates where we have to play the main event. It's a good target, but it's not my favorite target of the entire slate, particularly relative to ownership. So I know you said you're leaning towards Sandhagen, but how much ownership allocation are you giving towards Yadong when we aren't expecting him to win?
The 35% is a little too much for me, to be honest. 15 to 20 is more so like, and even for me, like I base a lot of my lineup construction on how I see the fights going, but I also take into account our tools on Stokastic.com and making sure that, I'm not boxing myself out of possibilities, because just going on projection or how you think a fight's going to go doesn't, it's a fight game, right? One shot, one injury, a bad decision. You need a lot of things to go right if you're just basing on your expectations going into it. So I would say that I'm a lot less than the 35%. And with 35%, of the field attracted towards Song Yadong at 7,000, that goes to tell me that there's plenty of other underdogs that are just kind of getting lost in the shuffle. So, I mean, like everybody's flocking to, I'm going to back Song Yadong because he has had some strong performances, and they're unwilling to take chances on some of these other underdogs because of the long odds, or just because of the poor salaries and poor debuts, having a lot of, volatile matchups, having fighters come in off of losses, Dana White contender series alumni. So it's a lot of volatility for this card, but I'm okay. And I'm going to embrace it.
Yeah, it's still a fight that it's one of my more exposed fights of this slate. It's just relative to the field's ownership. It's like, do I really want to play a 35% Yadong relative to some of these other underdogs that, frankly, right, I think probably have similar fantasy outputs in wins, but are just a little bit more likely to win and only have a fraction of the ownership. So he just look a little bit too popular for my liking, but still, it's a main event. It's one that warrants exposure. If you guys are playing cash games, I would still be stacking this in cash games, just because I do think Yadong, at least from a fantasy perspective, has a higher floor than the other fighters do around his price tag for cash game purposes. So one final thing I'll ask you before we move to some of the other fights on the card. Would you agree that this is a fight to stack in cash games?
Yeah, because, it's a bantamweight bout. The lighter the weight class, the more likely that it reaches the championship rounds or goes the distance. Knee-jerk reaction, I thought that this is probably going to go 5 rounds, but obviously we haven't seen Song Yadong go in the championship rounds, so we don't know how he's going to respond. A late finish is certainly possible, but I think Song Yadong can survive for 3 rounds, and at 7,000, it just makes a ton of sense. So I would agree. I would say stacking in cash is probably would be my go-to.
Yeah, and to back up what you said in terms of some of the data we have in terms of whether this fight will go the distance or not, if you look at the betting odds right now, like minus 175 to go over 4.5 rounds. So to me, a lot of the data indicates is a fight that's going the distance in all likelihood. And it's also probably going to be a striking based fight. I don't expect this to be a fight where we see very many takedowns attempted, because Corey Sandhagen for his career, 0.71 takedowns landed per 15 minutes. On the Yadong side, 0.45 takedowns landed per 15 minutes. Just neither of them are very active in terms of the wrestling or grappling. I think Sandhagen's actually a very good grappler. He just doesn't go to his wrestling very often, prefers to use his massive length to keep the fights at distance, just a lot of striking output. So that's the way I see this fight playing out. Let's talk about the co-main event. There are a lot of fights that I think are really high priority ones to target, and one of them is the co-main between Gregory Rodriguez and Chitty Bang Bang in Chukwuani. So this fight right now we have at, I believe, minus 250 to finish inside the distance. It is, right around minus, it depends actually. It's moved a little bit more. So some books have it all the way up to minus 280 to finish inside the distance. And this is a fight where we haven't seen very much of Chukwuani in the UFC. Mm-hmm. And he's looked very good during his time, actually much better than he looked outside of the UFC. So 100%. We saw him get a finish on the Contender Series. First round finish against Marc-Andre Barriault. First round finish against Dushko Todorovic. 2 fights that just did not last very long. But if you've seen his fights prior to coming in the UFC, he was somebody with a pretty massive liability in wrestling and grappling. And I do think that that is a clear path to victory for Gregory Rodriguez, should he choose to do it. The question becomes, will he choose to do it? Because we've seen him with wrestling and grappling advantages in other fights, and he hasn't opted to go to it. This is a very, very high-level black belt and judo practitioner. So I actually lean a little bit towards Gregory Rodriguez, even though all the line movement is on the Chukwuani side. A really high upside target fight for tournaments, and I think there's a lot of leverage on Rodriguez, and I did bet him plus 500 to win by submission. I think that line is a little bit long. How are you going to handle this fight in tournaments?
Yeah, so I love the fight, and I made a group, and this fight is a part of the group that I want to get to, because I just see GPP implications just one way or another. Chidi and Chukwuani, and this is like the balance, Greg. Like, it's really difficult to try to forecast the future when you recognize an Achilles heel a part of somebody's game, and then they start to find some momentum and they start picking up some victories. It's like, okay, have we even really seen the development? Is it just kind of, luck meeting opportunity? And Chidi and Chukwuani has looked great inside the UFC, even on the Contender Series. First round TKO KOs over Andre Barriault and Dusko Todorovic. But I mean, if you know Chidi Njokuani, you know that he can get taken down, controlled, gassed out on the mat, and susceptible to getting submitted as well, despite having a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu pedigree, but nowhere near Gregory Rodriguez. Like predominantly a Muay Thai striker, very, very talented on the feet, hits really hard. So like you have Chidi Njokuani sitting there at 8,000. And because of the line movement and everything, Chidi Njokuani is actually the favorite, sitting at minus 130. So whenever that movement happens at the 8,200, 8,000 price tag, I always find it interesting. And naturally, as a striker, I like Chidi Njokuani in the matchup because I think Gregory Rodriguez can get lured into a brawl, and he has tons of confidence in his stand-up, which is very good. Very good, by the way. He could knock out Chidi Njokuani, no problem at all. But the path of least resistance is incorporating takedowns to try to test that Achilles heel of Chidi Njokuani. Like that is so easy. Blend the striking with the takedowns, put him in a bad spot, gas him out, work towards a submission or a TKO on the mat. It's just a matter of implementing the correct the correct game plan. I can't tell you if he's going to do it. I can tell you that this fight is very close. And if ownership is flocking one way or another, I would agree with Greg that Gregory Rodriguez needs to get some more recognition on the slate because of the grappling upside. However, I'm picking Chidi Njokuani ever so slightly to win the bout via knockout. But it's a fight that I'm prioritizing. I really don't care who I get in my lineups. And I think the price point just makes it too hard to avoid.
I'm currently overweight to both sides. Yep. And actually kind of have equal exposure to both Chidi and Rodriguez. But since the ownership is going to be so much heavier on the Njokuani side, I'm more overweight to Rodriguez just from that fact. And we see this all the time, right? There's an 8,200, 8,000 fight, and one of them has odds value. It's not a ton, right? Mm-hmm. Njokuani is a minus 130 favorite, whereas Rodriguez is plus 110. But just that little bit of line value causes a whole bunch of lineups to be built in one way compared to the other. So that's why right now we have Njokuani with ownership projected in the mid 30% range, with Rodriguez just coming in around 20%. So that's where I see the value on Rodriguez, but I am going to be overweight to both sides because I think there's a lot of finishing equity, and both of them have pretty clear advantages in terms of, I think, Rodriguez's durability concerns that you brought up before. And then on the other side, Njokuani has grappling and defensive wrestling concerns. So if you look at right now, the current odds we have, finish inside the distance, Rodriguez is anywhere from plus 140 to plus 180 to finish inside the distance. Njokuani is anywhere from plus 150 to plus 160. Whoever wins this fight should score really well. It's a really high upside fight for DFS purposes, and one of many, many high upside fights that we have to target this weekend. Like you and I were talking about before the show, there's a whole bunch of fights that we are expecting to finish inside the distance. So what are the other fights that are really high priorities for you to target in tournaments?
I mean, there's a lot, obviously, as far as one-way traffic. Like we can start with where should we start? Okay, let's talk about Jillian Robertson, Maria Agapova. I really feel like women's MMA, the price point, 8,500 for Robertson, significant grappling upside with her, submission finish, grappling into a TKO on the mat, all in the realm of possibility. Agapova, sprawl and brawl, en route to a TKO finish because of Robertson's susceptibility of getting hit, shelling up on the feet and getting finished. It's just the price point that's hard to avoid. And, I just think it's volatile because we've seen inconsistent performances from both of them. And we have Agapova coming off of a submission loss to Marina Moroz, who chained together a couple takedowns en route to a nice second round submission. And that really works right into the strength of Jillian Robertson, who's coming off a tough decision defeat to JJ Aldrich. So I am picking Jillian Robertson, ever so slightly. I like the grappling upside. And I would like to think that the changes with her camp, still working with D Thomas, but also incorporating work at the Goat Shed. I would like to think that those hard sparring rounds are starting to help her develop her game. She's never going to be a striker by any means, but she needs to be able to compete on the feet enough so that when she threatens takedowns, that they come with a little bit more ease. But as far as lineup construction, man, like you tell me Agapova, breaks the slate, I'm really not surprised.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of interesting, there's a narrative in this slate, and we're seeing some people bring it up in the chat because I have read a story about this. We have Flex305JC saying that, what do we know about the Maria Agapova leg injury? So this is a quote from Maria Agapova saying, "No one gives a shit about me. She says that she has a serious injury, but she has to fight because she can't afford to undergo the operation. Have you seen anything about that? And I'm wondering if that impacts how you view this fight at all.
No, and I'll tell you what she should do. She should, what she should have done is when you have injuries that happen throughout camp, the amount of fighters, not me, of course, but the amount of fighters that fight with pre-existing injuries, and then you basically when the fight is done, they ask you and they evaluate you of what's going on with you and your body. You can have it covered if it happens in the fight. So it just magically should have happened in the fight. Yeah, I blew my knee out, even though you were nursing it all throughout camp. It's kind of sad that, the landscape of some of the financial, the finances in MMA, the lack of insurance, unless it's under competition. So I don't like that narrative. She's definitely fighting for the wrong reason, and kind of her hands feels forced. It makes me like Robertson more. I mean, it really does. It does. So we'll have to see. I try not to buy too much into that because, everybody's out there fighting a little hobbled. So we'll see, but I'm still picking Robertson.
Yeah. So for me, I think this is a really high upside fight to target in general anyway. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now is what are the high upside fights? I lean towards the Robertson side because stylistically, this is a favorable matchup for, not just because of the leg injury for Agapova, but we just saw her in a matchup that was kind of similar to this against Marina Moroz, where Moroz was able to land takedowns and Agapova didn't really have an answer for it. Nope. And not only do I think Robertson could implement that same kind of game plan, she's a much better grappler than Marina Moroz. So maybe she isn't as good of a wrestler, but as a grappler, she is much better. And if this gets to the match, she might be able to style on Agapova. So I view it this way. If Robertson's able to land takedowns, she's going to win and put up a massive score. If she is not able to land takedowns, she probably gets knocked out because Agapova has really nasty striking and hits really hard for this division. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the fights, like we said before, I think both sides, there is reason to roster it, but I'm going to be leaning towards the Robertson side for sure. To me, I don't really like to read into narratives too much. This is one of the ones that I think does matter, especially because she's confirmed it herself.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. We've also heard, as Al or AI says in chat about Ngannou with his injury. Yeah, I mean, we hear about some of these late reports. The fighting because she has to and nobody cares about her type of situation could make her a little bit more hungry to go out there and be aggressive. And, I will agree with you and say that Robertson's jiu-jitsu for women's MMA is some of the best. I really do for offensively. There's better wrestlers out there, but the way that she hunts finishes, I really like. It's like really DFS friendly, whether it's Agapova or Robertson, they're both DFS friendly for this slate. And I can't wait.
Yeah. So listen to these scores. These are Jillian Robertson's scores and wins, and then I'll read off Agapova's scores and wins. So all of the fights that we've seen from Jillian Robertson in the UFC, 116, 94, 92, 110, 106, 95, 97. Nasty. Nothing but good scores and wins. Agapova and her wins. Now, she obviously doesn't have nearly as much UFC experience as Jillian Robertson, but 2 wins for her, 93 fantasy points and 113. So it does seem to me like whoever wins is putting up a pretty big score relative to their price point. That's what makes this a high priority fight in my lineups, but leaning towards the Robertson side for me. And it seems like you were doing the same, but is Agapova still a fighter that you are playing a decent amount of in your lineups?
Oh yeah, of course. The one worry is how the 2 victories inside the UFC she's picked up were submission wins. I don't really see her submitting Jillian Robertson. I think that a lot of it was kind of like club and sub as far as for the opportunities in her wins. And that could happen. We've seen even Rodolfo Vieira get submitted, who's a guy who's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners out there. But I think her best path to victory is try to pull the Macy Barber and just TKO her on the feet. So I think sprawl and brawl all day long and make Jillian Robertson work en route to a TKO finish.
We've got a super chat here from my filler arc. And by the way, if anybody has questions in the Discord channel, just at me. We can answer those on the show as well. But my filler arc is saying, just came in. Sorry if you spoke on this already. Don't worry, we didn't, my filler arc. But Sabatini, Robertson, or Basharat as the last fighter. And of those 3, I actually have the most exposure to Robertson. However, relative to the other options, I think Sabatini is way more likely to pick up the win than Robertson is. So of those, once again, to reread, Sabatini, Robertson, Basharat, I like Sabatini the most. Pete, if you were picking out of those three, what would be your choice for my filler arc?
Yeah, so safest, I would say Sabatini if you want a win, and a guy that I personally have a ton of confidence in because I know his coach really well and I know the team really well. Renzo Gracie, Philly, really close with my team, Renzo Gracie, Rhode Island. So Pat Sabatini, a guy that I don't necessarily have blinders on, but I can recognize talent, and the pace pressure is phenomenal. So safety and security, I would say Sabatini. But as far as upside and slate breaking ability, I actually think that Robertson might be that GPP commodity because it's a fight that I'm prioritizing.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. And, one of the fighters he mentioned there that I picked was Pat Sabatini. And it's a pretty interesting high end of the pricing range today because we've got these fighters, and I'll just break down all the fighters we have at 9K plus, and then we'll go over our priorities. So Pat Sabatini, who I think should have a pretty big strength advantage over Damon Jackson. And then also somebody who's historically scored very well in his wins, Pat Sabatini, 106, 105, 90 in his last 3 UFC fights. Then we've got Trevin Giles, who I am kind of skeptical on him as a fighter overall because of his low output, but he's fighting somebody in Luis Kosei who traditionally has had one round, or I wouldn't say traditionally, because he's fought 8 fights, 7 of them he's won inside the first round. And the only time we've seen him outside the first round, he gassed horrifically after that first round. Yeah. So Trevin Giles is there at 9,100, Sandhagen 92. We've talked about the co-main event. We talked about the main event already. Then we got Nicholas Mota, who has a whole bunch of finishing equity at 9,300. Daniel Zelubarts at 9,400, another fighter with a lot of finishing equity. And then Joe Pyfer coming off the Contender Series at $9,700, the most finishing equity on the slate. So how are you prioritizing the high end of the pricing?
I mean, Pyfer is my guy this week. I think it's the easiest matchup. Some of the best inside the distance odds. It's just, you're kind of boxing yourself out of possibilities because of the 9,700 price tag. I would probably recommend leveling with the ownership or being close to it. Luke Boomy, not a fighter that I'm getting to at all. I don't really like that fight as far as DFS is considered. After that, it's pretty interesting when you exclude the main event. I really like Pat Sabatini from a grappling standpoint. I think if he doesn't have a strength advantage, then we could see a striking matchup, which I don't like for his style. His Achilles heel is definitely his striking. It's in development. He's trying to get better with it. He can still knock you out and hurt you, but clearly he's not comfortable there. And, I think he's going to recognize that, have a good game plan, still incorporate his hands to pin Damon Jackson against the cage and try to replicate that Mirsad Bektic fight. Obviously Damon Jackson's super, super dangerous as far as submission grappling is considered. But when I tell you that there's levels to grappling, Pat Sabatini, if he gets Damon Jackson down, I really feel like he can finish Damon Jackson. Like that's how nasty this kid is when it comes to his jiu-jitsu. So then it's really tough for me. Like I have to tell you, outside of Joe Pyfer, Corey Sandhagen, and Sabatini, I have the rest of them they kind of all look the same. They all look volatile to me. Are you in agreement with me? Like Zell Huber, Nicholas Mota, Trevin Giles, like they're fights that I like. But as far as like confidence, plant your flag type of thing, it's like, I mean, you're talking about Giles 5-4 in the UFC, Nicholas Mota 0-1, Zell Huber making his UFC debut. Like that's a lot to really invest in a lot of unknown commodities.
Yeah, and when it comes to Joe Pyfer, it's easy to pick him to win and easy to pick him to win by finish as well. Like, what are his current odds to win inside the distance? I know it's something ridiculous. The most recent
Pyfer?
line,
it might be at -250 now.
Yeah, so Joe Pyfer inside the distance, -250 to -300, depending what book you're looking at. But here's the issue: the price tag. Like, we've rarely see fighters priced all the way up to $9,700, and even though I have him projected as the highest fantasy output on average on this slate, and I have him, pretty well above anybody else, I'm still struggling to get more than like 30% of him just because of the salary constraints. It's really hard to play somebody who's $9,700. It doesn't offer a whole lot of salary savings elsewhere. So even Joe Pyfer, who's my most confident pick on the card because he's the biggest favorite, there's a reason he's $9,700. I'm going to be underweight to him just because of the salary. I don't find him easy to fit into lineups at that kind of number.
Yeah, I mean, we need a lot of underdogs to come through, right? Like, and that's just how it is. If the underdogs don't come through, then the possibility of having a Pfeiffer in the optimal decreases. So I understand that. I think a week like this, though, where there's so many fights, it kind of opens the door for it to happen. If this was, less fights and there were some other interesting options at the top, then I would be like, okay, but, besides Zell Huber to pick up a finish, everything else seems a little risky. So I'm actually going to Joe Pfeiffer a decent amount because I am expecting so many upsets on this card. But I'm in agreement with you. We're saying the same thing. And yeah, I'm rooting for Pat Sabatini. I just worry if it becomes a striking matchup.
All right, we've got a super chat from Sam Pierce. Thoughts on single entry on DK, 1,200 entrants. So big field, but nothing crazy, right? This isn't like 20,000 or anything.
Yep.
It's going with Kosi, Gravely, Hernandez, Nchukwuani, Joe Pfeiffer, Jillian Robertson, trying to be not chalky, and if change any and for whom, also best DK captain. All right, so you are playing a lot of fairly popular fighters in there. I think the easiest way to differentiate that lineup would be to go from Nchukwuani to Gregory Rodriguez. It's a fight that, like I said before, I'm overweight to both sides of. For single entry, where Nchukwuani has that kind of odds value, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being like 40% owned in single entry and Rodriguez is 15%. And even if we were to say that Nchukwuani is more likely to win the fight, it's still close to a pick 'em. And let's say the odds, fair lines here. It's like 56-44. There's going to be a bigger split on that, particularly in single entry, than the odds warrant. So that would be one thing I think you can make a change to differentiate your lineup a little bit. But I'll reread these names to you, Pete. And is there anything in here that you disagree with? Kosi, Gravely, Hernandez, and Nchukwuani, Pfeiffer, and Jillian Robertson. Any of those fighters that you don't like?
I really like your thought process on going from Nchukwuani to Gregory Rodriguez, just because of how close the fight is aligned and how disrespected Rodriguez is, even though I'm still picking Nchukwuani to win. I think that Tony Gravely might be one of the most popular underdogs on the slate. And it's, a lot of people are looking to get to somebody, and in the mid 20 range is okay for him. It's just the Basharat brothers, man. Like they've been looking damn good, but relatively untested as well. And you have Tony Gravely at 7,600. So it's like, okay, you're not going to Tony Gravely. Who are you going to go to? And I actually like the Louis Kosei.
Yeah, same.
I don't know how else you would pivot. I might recommend going to, I really don't know how. I kind of like the lineup, but it seems like it's chalky options, but I don't have any ways to kind of get different without hating the lineup. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay, to be honest. I'd probably stick with it for single entry.
Yeah, it's a good lineup. If you are looking to reduce ownership, like I said, go to Gregory Rodriguez instead of Nchukwuani. That's one thing that's going to give you a lot of leverage on the field. But otherwise, I think you're targeting good fights, a lot of high upside fighters in there. Yeah. So no real issues. And then the other part of his question was, who's our favorite DK captain today? So let me pull up some of the DK captain contest right now. I have not built lineups for this yet. I might after the show ends, though. I just haven't to this point. I've done this before.
To do it after the first couple fights, and I'm like, all right, well, got to make money back, or have to double down.
Yeah. Also, this is the fourth show I've done today. It's just been back to back to back since I got. So I have only been able to build lineups for the MMA main slate, the MLB early slate. Then after this, I'll build lineups for the MLB late slate and then maybe the MMA captain one as well. But looking at this, once in the mid range, Rodriguez and Nchukwuani, I think that's a good fight to target. One thing that is kind of interesting on the high end, Joe Pfeiffer does not have the same. He's not as expensive relative to the classic contest. Mm-hmm. So he would be the safest one, but at the same time too, he's going to be crazy popular. I would say still Gregory Rodriguez there and just go for the leverage and as much upside as possible in tournaments.
Yeah. I mean, you can always roster the underdog that you're backing in the captain spot, but you have to recognize the risk with that as well. For this one, it's interesting because we have Sabatini price at 8,600 and Bozer at 8,200. So in the captain spot, 12.3 for Bozer, 12.9 for Sabatini. I kind of like those for like from a leverage standpoint. If you compare them to their classic ownership on the regular slate and their classic salary as well. So I would probably say the most contrarian would be Tanner Bozer, but I kind of like the Sabatini and Bozer, just a way to get different.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. And I want to talk more about the Gravely Basharat fight, because this is another one that I think is a high priority target in tournaments. It does look like right now we have Basharat being one of the more popular fighters on the slate. We've got Basharat projected for 32% ownership compared to 22% for Gravely. The ownership, at least we have projected on the low end, is really spread out, with the exception being Song Yadong picking up a ton of ownership. But we get to the range of Agapova, let me see, through, yeah, basically on down until, other than Song Yadong, nobody's expected to be all that popular. Gravely, the most popular of them at 22%. That's not a whole lot of ownership in the grand scheme of things. And there's more fights than typical this week, which also caused it to be a little bit spread out. I think this is a good fight to target because of the pace that Tony Gravely keeps. You look at the metrics on him. He lands 3.92 significant strikes per minute and 6.65 takedowns per 15 minutes. Here's the key to me. Can Gravely take down Basharat in this fight? Do you think that's likely to happen?
I think it is, but I also, because I know how talented Tony Gravely is in the wrestling department. With that being said, throughout his entire career, he has been susceptible to getting caught, whether it's via submission or via KO, TKO. And some of that is largely due to his gas tank. He pushes a ridiculous pace early. And I will say that you're on the edge of your seat, hoping that he can absorb the shot, hoping that he can find that gas tank reserve to, make it through the entire fight without getting finished. And the way that the Basharat guys can grapple and strike well at distance makes them a very, very tricky matchup. So 8,600. And I know Trevin Jones, the name value doesn't hold the same stock that it did in the COVID era, but I still think it's a pretty impressive win. It's just a matter of defending the takedowns, keeping this, on the feet, butchering him, and, possibly threatening with a submission. I don't hate the fight at all to target, and I actually really like it. But as far as like making mistakes, Tony Gravely in his regional career was making a lot of mistakes. And, that high pace can, make a coward of you once that fatigue hits. So we shall see. I'm kind of neutral to the ownership right there. Like I understand the 22% for Tony Gravely, and Basharat's pretty popular. I don't know if I really want to get to as much as what I'm seeing right there, but I do expect him to edge out Tony Gravely in the fight.
Listen to these fantasy scores by Gravely in his wins too. 102, 128, 138, 109. So the least he's ever scored in a win on DK is 109. And just because of the kind of pace he keeps, if he loses, his opponents score really well also.
True.
So this is going to be a big test for me for Baccarat, because I just don't know if he's able to keep up this kind of pace over an extended fight. And I know that Gravely can. So we'll see what happens. I think this is also another really high upside fight to target because of the pricing. I lean towards the Gravely side. I'm going to be overweight to him, and he's one of my favorite GPP targets in that lower mid-range, because there aren't other fighters I really love getting to from like 77 on down. We talked about Agapova as being a viable target, but there's big concerns about her. Are there any other cheap fighters that you do really like getting to? I know there's one before. I'm kind of leading you on a little bit. Who's the other cheap fighter that you like getting to today?
Well, I mean, I like Louis Kosey. I talked about him from a round one standpoint. I think that he can pick up a knockout. And I also think that the Cameron Van Camp is interesting. I think that he's susceptible to getting knocked out. Hands are low a lot, makes a ton of mistakes, coming down to his more natural weight class. But he did look pretty good early against Andre Fiallo. So, like, I know we've kind of hit on it already, but I am prioritizing at the bottom end, getting to Louis Kosey. Truthfully, I just think that Louis Kosey, with the risk of Trevin Giles getting knocked out and just kind of how he's at his career right now, I would just much rather get to Louis Kosey, hoping for some development in this absence from the cage. So Yeah, give me Kosei at 7,100 as one of my favorite bottom end options.
Yeah, I love the finishing equity of him. That, and we have him projected for, let's see, 13% ownership for Luis Kosei. Here's what I like about him. He's very untrustworthy. We all saw his last fight where he just beat the shit out of Sasha Palatnikov in the first round. And in the second round started, was like, oh no, Kosei has absolutely nothing left in the tank.
Yeah.
And got 10-8'd in the second round and then got finished in the third round because he gassed out going for the finish. But you look at that kind of fight, and also 8 professional fights for Kosei. 7 of them wins in the first round. 1 loss is the only time he's ever been out of the first round. He's taken 2 years off now, and I just don't know what to expect from him. I kind of think he probably took that time to work on his cardio. Maybe he's been injured. Who's to say? I'm hoping that maybe he worked on his cardio a little bit. I hope he didn't work on his fight IQ and pace himself. That's the last thing I want to happen. I don't want him to pace himself. I want him to go out there and look for the kill right in the open going, because I want to get a lot of potential fantasy points from a punt play that I have on the slate. So in terms of just pure punts, of the fighters who are below 7,500, Kosei's my favorite target just because I know what his fantasy upside looks like in a win. And that's a lot of fantasy points. All this guy knows how to do when he wins is first round finishes. That's why I'm a little surprised. His first round win prop, I don't know if you've seen this, Pete, plus 850.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit that from a betting perspective. And like I said, I like Luis Kosei. As far as the Kosei brothers are considered, I actually think that Luis Kosei is the better brother of the two. And I think that it was a pretty tough debut to go up against Sasha Palatnikov. I don't think Sasha's all that great, but it's not easy. It's not like a lot of these UFC debuts. And he hits really hard. We know he hits really hard. How is Trevin Giles going to respond when he gets hit hard? Outside of gassing, like Kosei brings a wrestling element to, lifelong wrestler as well. Hits strong, hits really hard. If he somewhat paces himself a little bit better, he could have a breakthrough performance here. And, you don't know how a fighter's going to respond from being absent from the cage. But I can say that when I've taken time away and I've been away from the cage for, a couple of years right now, I've developed a lot. And not everybody's equal, but I would imagine being a part of Team Alpha Male and just, having good people around him, that he's developing and working on his weaknesses, and he's probably going to come out looking better. I mean, especially coming off a loss like that, you don't come back until you're ready. So 7,100 Kosei, way too cheap, way too underowned guy that I'm bullish on today. He could get knocked out. He could get dragged into deep water and Giles gets a nice victory. But yeah, back-to-back KO defeats for Giles. It seems like too easy to pass up at 7,100.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Pete and I just talked about Kosei plus 850 to win inside the first round. Seems like a good value bet. And, sometimes in UFC MMA fights, it's hard to look at a number like, oh, we think like we're not picking plus 850 because we think he's for sure going to win in the first round. We just see value on that number, which same. Like I have Gregory Rodriguez 5-1 to win by submission. Another bet I've placed today. I'm just looking for value where I think the likelihood of stuff happening, it just happens more often than what the odds are. But also, if you guys want free money, just money given away for free, we have a deal with BetMGM right now. It's only going to be for tomorrow for football. So if you are going to place a football bet tomorrow and you've not signed up at BetMGM, if you place a $10 bet and sign up clicking on the link in the description box below, place a $10 money line bet on any NFL game tomorrow on BetMGM, they're going to give you $200 for free. There's no risk involved in that. That's, we're trying to do our best to find 5-1, 8-1 props, but it's not $200 for free. And that's what BetMGM is going to do for you. When you click on that link below, sign up and just place a $10 bet on any NFL money line. But you have to place the bet tomorrow because it's just the way the deal works. If you were to bet it on Saturday, it won't be activated. You have to bet on Sunday. All right. Who have we not talked about, Pete? Well, actually, I want to answer some of these super chats because the time is going down quickly. So some super chats just came in. Corey Randall, DK single entry. I can't get away from Nascimento and Algeo. Talk me off this ledge, or do you like them? Nascimento and Algeo, are these high priority fighters in your lineups?
Well, Corey, for my sake, I hope that Nascimento does not break the slate. It's heavyweight MMA, as evidenced last week. Chris Barnett shows you how you can't, count out a heavyweight as an underdog, and pretty similar to women's MMA. So I always think it's important to get exposure to those underdogs just because of how much variance is associated with those divisions and those skill levels. For me personally, though, I think that Tanner Boser has made a career out of, sprawl and brawl. And everybody's, his opponents are usually the bigger fighter. They want to take him to the mat. This isn't anything new. He's looked really, really good of late. And if he doesn't get taken down, I really think that he knocks out Nascimento. And I know this is a guy typically known for going the distance. So, but he started to really touch that chin. Nascimento's never been in the third round. I think the later this fight goes, the more that it works in Tanner Bozer's favor. And I think that, seeing how Bozer handled Alir Latifi, even though it was a split decision defeat, Alir Latifi, much more dominant of a wrestler, not as threatening from a submission standpoint. But yeah, it's a Tanner Bozer play for me. But on paper, I can see why you would want to get to Nascimento. And as far as Algeo, in his past 5 fights, he has been significantly better than Andre Fili. It just comes down to how many times he gets taken down, right? Because his Achilles heel is getting taken down, controlled. He has a great get-up game. But, I mean, if you're spending, 3/4 of the fight working back to your feet, you're losing minutes in an MMA fight.
Yeah, it's a fight for me. I do favor Boser to win. He typically doesn't score super well in his wins. There is some finishing equity. He has good odds to finish inside the distance relative to most cards. Although with that said, relative to the other pay-up options on the slate, he doesn't have as much finishing equity. So it's a fight I'm overall a little bit lower on than the field. Next super chat from Doogie Duggar. Hernandez or Jillian Robertson? Also, love your videos. Thanks for the super chat and thanks for the support. Which fighter do you prefer today, Hernandez or Robertson?
I'm going Robertson, just because like Hernandez looks amazing, but I'm still, I don't know, like he pushes such a high pace that I'm worried about him just kind of like getting caught in a submission, even though Marc-Andre Barrios is not really a submission guy. I like what I've seen from Jillian Robertson. So yeah, I think just the fight of Robertson Agapova in general makes me want to get to Robertson. And guys, we got 444 people in here. Greg and I are really happy to be here on a Saturday, breaking down this card for you. If you guys can get us over 120 likes, please hit that like button. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just a click of the button. It's free. We've also got free content up on the site. And if you guys want to sign up and get our football tools for free for tomorrow, you get 3 days of a Stokastic Plus Platinum Pass by signing up right now. If you're new to the site, you get 3 days for free and you get access to all the tools you're going to need to build winning NFL DFS lineups, our ownership projections, player projections, top stacks tool for which teams are going to score the highest points, all that kind of stuff. And it's free to use. So go take advantage of that offer now because it's 3 days for free. Why not take advantage of something that is free? All right. Next super chat is from Hollywood Will. Tips, reviews, news, and vlogs. That's quite the YouTube handle. What are your thoughts on a Gravely, Sabatini, Njokuani, or a Sandhagen parlay? Don't like it. That is, well, number one, I'm not a massive fan of parlays in general, but that's just a lot of fighters to parlay. And I don't really love the current betting odds. And then Njokuani, if you'd bet him earlier in the week when he was an underdog and not the favorite, sure. But now I think you're kind of catching him where he's already at fair odds.
Yeah, I mean, what's up, Will? Appreciate you as always. Checking the shows out. I'm not in favor of that parlay. If I had to give you a parlay, I would give you one from the Odd Chopper video I put out there. And I don't typically like parlaying props. It's usually a nightmare doing so. But it was Joe Pyfer inside the distance at -250 in combination with Pat Sabatini and Tanner Bozer, and that sat at $100, won you $354. So I think that's much more likely. And, some fights where I feel pretty confident in Sabatini and Bozer to get it done. And obviously Joe Pyfer.
Yeah. I mean, those are some of the safer, at least. I mean, overall in general, I'm not a massive fan of just parlaying stuff together, but I mean, that's if you're just parlaying, like you've got some close fights in there. You've got an underdog in Tony Gravely, who I think you could make a case that there's betting value on him, but it's really tough to win some of those bets where you're just parlaying some underdogs or close fights together. So not one that I'm a massive fan of, just a little bit too risky for me and a low likelihood of actually winning. We've got a few minutes left here, Pete, and once again, big card. There's a lot to hit on, and coming up right after us, we've got other shows. So we also do have to be out of here at 3:55. But which fighters or fights have we not yet talked about that are going to be high priority for you?
Yeah, so we can kind of answer Neil's question and answer that as well. He says, what do you think about fading the Luke Boomy Gomez fight in 150 lineups? For me personally, I'm not prioritizing that fight. So like that's a fight that I'm okay with getting away from. For 150 lineups, it would probably just be a Luke Boomy in a small, but at that point, why bother? So I just think the salary makes too much sense to avoid. So as far as fights, the Cameron Van Camp and the Nicholas Moda one is we have not talked about that at all. And that seems like, despite what the ownership is reflecting, it seems like one that is going to end inside the distance, as you and I talked about pre-show. It seems like a volatile matchup. Question marks surrounding both, and they both get hit a lot and throw bombs. So why avoid that? I'm including that in my group as well, where I wanted to get to one of these GPP fighters that I think is going to make it into the optimal lineup.
Yeah, so we have this fight. The last I looked at the odds, it was, because you and I are talking about before, it's nearly a pick 'em to finish inside the first round. And there is not a lot of ownership going to either side of this fight. So closely lined fight, depending what book you look at. Moda's anywhere from minus 150 to minus 175 favorite. So close odds. And then in terms of the fight finishing inside the distance, it's like minus 250 to minus 270. And then it's also plus 110 to finish inside the first round. Like, this is a fight that I think the winner should score very well on.
Yeah.
I want to get exposure to both sides. And I have a lean towards Van Camp just because of the odds value, right? He's so cheap.
Yep.
And then also there's the chance this fight, the winner should score really well. So I lean towards him, but I also think Moda's getting slept on the high end, because right now we have neither of these fighters projected for ownership. We have Moda projected for, let's sort by fights here. All right. So we've got Van Camp projected for 15% ownership, Moda projected for 14%. In a fight that's expected to finish in the first or second round and is, minus 280 to finish inside the distance, it warrants a lot more exposure than 15 and 14%.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 43% round one odds for Van Camp, 62% for Moda. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. And I do think the odds are a little wide as far as the salaries are saying. So that's why I'm getting to a ton of Cameron Van Camp naturally. And that's why I kind of think it's strange of how the salaries were this week, a little bit high end Pfeiffer, that's like Hamzat Chimaev territory. And then you have this discrepancy as well.
Yeah. So this is the fight I think that the field is too light on. It's the one I'm the most overweight to. This is the fight that, at least per what the field is at, I've got mid 30% of both Van Camp and Moda. So more than double the field at our current projected ownership. Any other spots that you want to talk about in these last few minutes that we've not yet hit on, Pete?
I mean, not really. I mean, the Zell Huber fight is one where we really haven't touched on it. And I think it's just because he's an unknown commodity. The Golden Boy, he's talented for sure, but it's him against Trey Ogden. Like, Trey Ogden didn't really have the best performance against Jordan Levitt, but at the same time, we know that he has a wealth of experience, decently talented in all areas, gets hit a lot, gasser. So it's weird. It's weird to me to always see a Dana White Contender Series alums atop the salary, Pfeiffer, and then Zell Huber.
Yeah, it's one for me. Actually, I'm pretty high on Zell Huber, and he's a fighter that just based on talent. Yep. I think that he is somebody who's going to be sticking in the UFC and should also be somebody that scores pretty well in his wins. I think he's somebody else with a lot of finishing equity. He is currently, he is now at minus 105 to win inside the distance. And even if he doesn't win inside the distance, I think the output should be there.
Yeah.
So he's not the fighter I've projected for the most points at the high end. I have Pfeiffer projected for more. I've got Sandhagen projected for more, but he's third for me after that, which I guess, he's 9,400. He should. So I have him right now, right around even with the field, low 30%. We have him projected for 34% ownership. Are you going to come in, do you think, over or underweight to him?
I'll probably be a little under, to be honest, just because I'm trying to construct as many Pfeiffer lineups as possible. I understand what that does to me, but I'd probably just take the known commodity in Sandhagen with the 5-round potential, possible takedown potential as well. Last quick question for me, for Greg. What happens about Amedovski? Amedovski flips this slate on its head. I don't really think it happens at all. What's more likely, Denise Gomez upset. Amidovsky, obviously it's Denise Gomez, and some of the ownership is kind of reflective of that, but I don't really care for either one of them, to be honest.
Well, I mean, just based on the odds, it's Gomez. It's Gomes by a mile because the fight is not lined that one-sided. She's only plus 176. She's projected for ownership. I mean, I think the most likely scenario, though, is still Luka Lumbumi wins. But here's the other side. I don't think Gomes is going to score particularly well if she does win. So I think she doesn't have that much win equity. And then even if it happens, I don't think she's all that likely to be optimal. So it's not really a fight that I like.
Yeah, same. Okay, cool.
All right, so that is going to do it for us today, guys. But if you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because MLB Live Before Lock is on right after us.